And now we're happy to address any questions you have about data mining and predictive analytics. This is what we consider the free consulting segment of our webinar, Open Access to the Modeling Agency's Advanced Analytic Gurus, Senior Consultants Keith McCormick and Scott Terry. Now, Scott stepped out for a moment. He used to be back in a little bit, not back as of yet, so hopefully he'll be rejoining us. But nonetheless, you'll be in great hands with Keith, and I also have perspectives more from a project management view. We'll be able to take great care of your questions that are coming in. We do have room for a few more. And let's start to round these up now. And like I say, well, let's just jump into the first one here. Let's go with Juan. Has a couple of questions that are not really unrelated. So let me put them together and throw this out to you, Keith. Juan asks, first, how do you know that you have enough data? And the second part is, how do we know that our conclusions are valid? Those are great questions. Let me go ahead and unmute you, Keith, and so you can respond to Juan.
I agree, Eric, that they're related. So I'm glad that you made them a pair. So let me start with the how do we know our conclusions are valid part. You know, in statistics, there are all kinds of elaborate techniques for doing this that are often quite complex to rookies. We don't do it that way in predictive analytics for a lot of reasons. We have an approach that actually I think is a little bit easier to learn. We divide the data at random into at least two portions. Sometimes people argue you want to have three, but I won't get into that now. But the whole notion is that you have a trained data set and a test data set. And you build the models on the trained data set. But before you attempt to do anything with them, you verify that they're effective on the test data. So this is terribly important. It's called the whole validation. It's not the only way that we have to do this, but it is the most common way. It is the most primary way. So how you determine that you have enough data is that you have to make sure that you set aside some extra data for that test data. Now, frankly, generally, having enough data is usually not a problem in that we're using data that's been captured during the normal course of doing business, and it's not unusual to have hundreds of thousands or millions of rows of data. But there is a well-known circumstance that's not uncommon that can cause you to worry a little bit about size, and that is really out of balance. So let's say you're doing credit card fraud. Well, you might have hundreds of thousands of transactions, but you're not going to have, I hope, tens of thousands of frauds out of hundreds of thousands of transactions. It's more like, hopefully, hundreds of frauds or hundreds of thousands or even millions of transactions. So then what you want is you want enough of the data that's common, that would be the transactions that aren't fraudulent, enough of the transactions that are rare, and then you need them to be both train and test. So if you kind of followed me, you really have four buckets. You've got common and rare train data, common and rare test data, and you have to make sure you have enough of all of them. Long story short, if the data is not out of balance like the credit card data, as few as 10,000 records probably does the job. I've done a number of projects where the sample size is down in that range. If you get lower than that, if you only have 1,000 or two, you just have to reach into your toolkit and make some modifications. I know that's a lot to chew on, but that's the beginning of an answer, certainly.
Sure, and I think you can take double time until Scott returns. You've got more time to respond to each, and we're not overwhelmed with questions at this point, but there are a few great ones coming in. I'll take the next one because it's a little more administrative. We have one participant who came in a good bit late, wanted to know if we record the session and if it's going to be available afterward. Actually, we purposefully do not record these because we offer them live every month, and we do want to encourage live participation, again, for the polling and the like. So if you return to the webinar page on our website, just go back to the modelingagency.com with the hyphens, the-modeling-agency.com. In the navigation bar, you'll see webinar. Just head to there. You'll see the next 3 productions coming up and sign up for one that works well for your schedule. And you can either head out when you come back to the part where the content starts to sound familiar, or what I'd recommend, since it seems that you missed more than half of the event today, go through the whole event, but come back with some great questions for us. We'll be glad to entertain those when you return. You're very welcome. And there was one other thing here I wanted to touch on, and I don't see where it was. So let me go on to an outstanding question. I love this one. Santiago asks, a quote before the presentation began stated, oh, this must have been in our quips that go through in the waiting room. A quote before the presentation began stated that culture was a primary factor in the success of implementing a data-driven environment. How do you recommend initiating conversations about evolving the current culture? I'll start off on this one, Keith, and I'd love for you to extend your insights on this. We have a crib sheet, actually, combined with a lot of experience from reality. But I will say this, we have a crib sheet that's going to initiate the conversations and make sure that we go through all of the kinds of things that you typically run into in an organization, including those even beyond. There's some questions that after you ask a few surface questions, many others don't apply down that thread. And then the rest, we kind of know what to go through in most large organizations or even to the enterprise level to ensure that there is an analytic culture, and alternatively, if there's a negative culture toward analytics where it was going to be doomed no matter how technically correct you approach the project, if culturally it's not going to be adopted, we can look at those kind of things. But I will tell you this, and I think Keith will agree, we kind of have it easier as external consultants. This is not a plug for us. It's just a warning for those of you who may wish to try this internally, that we can ask the kind of questions that won't impact our employment, and being external to the organization. It's easier for us to ask some delicate questions that could come into leadership's perspectives, or even courage about shifting from a data-driven perspective to, or I'm sorry, a gut-driven to data-driven, or multiple leadership who may have to be involved in either resourcing data or funding, or it may get territorial or political, and easier for an external consultant to go through some of those things. But they are the kinds of things that should be looked at before the tactical aspects of the project are engaged in, and important to reveal. So, but like I say, the modeling practice framework that we follow considers many, if not most, of the kinds of situations you would get into to verify that there is either a positive culture or there's warning signs that we need to address before we even get to the starting line. So, see, I can be self with the mic beyond others as well, Keith. So with that, let me yield and see what you'd like to add around analytic culture.
Well, I have a couple of quick comments, Eric, so thank you. The first is, there's that old saying. It's not a technical saying, but I think it applies. The old, you can't be a prophet in your own land. And I do find that sometimes that organizations don't listen enough to their own internal voices, because anyway, I think that's there's a lesson, right there, that there's probably a lot of wisdom right within the organization, and in some cases people aren't getting enough opportunity to share it. Then the other thing I would say is that, obviously the kind of culture that we want to encourage is a highly collaborative one. So the two extremes that I'll sometimes find when that culture is not present is you get analysts who are treated with suspicion. I had one member of a client organization in particular that used a phrase that everybody found kind of humorous. She called it the swanky map, right? It's kind of like, I don't know what those analysts are up to, but they produce all that swanky map, right? So obviously you don't want that. And then the opposite extreme would be analysts cranking out black box solutions that are mysterious, and the expectation is everyone's just going to do their bidding, right? And of course that's not at all what we want to encourage. You want to have a highly collaborative environment. Now that doesn't mean that everyone in the organization is helping build models. As you point out, Eric, that this is a process that unfolds over some time, and there are the right moments when to involve folks. But one thing in particular that people forget to do is they don't involve the people that are going to be impacted by a deployed model until they go live, and it's much, much too late. You have to involve them in the earliest stages when you're all trying to agree upon what the problem definition is. And then some of those folks might be on the sidelines for quite a while until the end of the project. But you don't simply deliver a solution to someone when they weren't part of defining the problem.
Great perspectives. Thanks for that, Keith. Outstanding. Hey, Keith, can you tell me, I know I've talked through the poll results. I'm not sure I actually displayed them. Do you recall whether on the last poll whether?
Yeah, I thought you did. You know, quite a few people voted for primary model stuff, but there was also a lot of interest in unstructured.
That's right. Okay, so it actually displayed. I couldn't recall whether I actually displayed the results or not. Okay, very good. One quick housekeeping note here. Will the newsletter, this is from Robert, include upcoming webinars? Typically it doesn't actually. It does mention upcoming courses almost in each edition. The webinar may have a link, but I don't think we usually put in the dates. Best thing to do is just stop back to the website, look for again the webinar link in the nav bar. But the newsletter does have you know, outside of upcoming course dates, it'll have a feature article. It has industry announcements. Again, it's largely non-promotional. As long as you don't really count us talking about the dates of the upcoming courses as being too promotional, the rest is very informative, I believe, and balanced in a way that it's you know, vendor neutral and the like. So let's wrap up with one final question here from Fernando. What are the keys to establishing an effective and deliverable roadmap to predictive analytics and modeling? Great question. Love that one. I'll go ahead and get started on that. And I would say follow an existing process. It doesn't have to be the modeling agencies, and actually the modeling agencies is simply an extension of an industry standard practice called the Cross-Industry Standard Practice for Data Mining, or CRISP, Cross-Industry Standard Practice for Data Mining. So, you know, pick one that's out there, and in our course where we go over a number of them, or introduce them at least, a number of different industry standard processes for analytics, and start from the very beginning. And the beginning is not software and data. You know, it starts back with doing a more comprehensive assessment that goes into, as we were talking about here, culture and resources and mindset, and the makeup of the team and the various roles that are included, and starting out with the kinds of meetings to ensure that the resources are going to support the objectives. And there may have been several ideas in mind for analytics. It's not just about right-sizing them or even looking at specifically the projects, but which could help us to advance the overall capability of the organization and help to build a better factory that the organization can advance on its own. So there are, you know, crib sheets. There are existing process models that you can follow, and there's a lot of aspects that are highly situational. There's parts of the model that will not apply, and but do consider everything that the models are recommending. There are a few process models out there that I'm personally not as fond of, simply because they're more focused on what I consider to be a single model implementation, as opposed to looking more strategically at an overall analytic practice. I think you should start further upstream to ensure, like Keith was saying, you've got to think ahead of time with the end in mind. Think about how it's going to be deployed. How is it going to be operational? If you're not thinking about that at the very beginning, then again, it's going to be an esoteric exercise, analytics for the sake of analytics. So let me pause there and give Keith the final word before we go ahead and wrap this up.
Well, my answer, Eric, would be very, very similar to yours. I can't imagine. I mean, look, we all agree that projects like this are doable by small, medium, large organizations. You know, that there's no reason why everyone can't be engaging in this kind of activity. But I cannot imagine an organization on their first outing, on their very first project, if they were going blind with no plan, I can't imagine that they'd even be able to put a timeline together, or even decide who should be on the team. You know, and I can tell you, that this certainly is usually not a solo project. You're not going to. This isn't going to be something where a single person is going to do the whole thing from start to finish. So if you're going to collaborate, you need some kind of a plan. So I think you absolutely want to use an existing roadmap.
Terrific. Yeah, because a lot of that just comes from, those roadmaps were developed with so much experience behind them, and teams of people, and those who have a lot of highly pragmatic background, very seasoned practitioners. So you kind of have a cheat sheet there to step you through all of the aspects that should be followed to go through and develop that roadmap, either for your project or for a larger practice for your team or for your organization. So at nearly half past the hour, we better draw this event to a close. I'd certainly like to thank our attendees today for your sustained interest and your active participation, as well as Scott and Keith for your great segments, and certainly to Keith for your highly informative Q&A contributions. We'll follow up with an email shortly with some resources and suggestions that will hopefully be useful to you. From there, we'll hope you've offered permission for us to stay in touch through the Modeling Agency's newsletter, and that you consider joining us for a public training event soon. Make sure to register by tomorrow if you'd like to join us next week for the May 18 and 19 Predictive Analytics and Data Mining Model Development course. That's the tactical orientation for model building. And Keith will be the facilitator. He'll be the instructor for that course. Or by week's end, register to attend the May 23rd and 24th Data Analytics for Action and Impact course, also in DC, also with Keith. Otherwise, mark your calendar now and secure the very early bird discount for the Los Angeles production in August if the timing and location work out better for you. Keep in mind that your colleagues can join you anytime for up to 30% off at the same event. Now, if you don't have a training or travel budget but would like the guidance of a seasoned mentor, you might be interested in the Modeling Agency's Escort on Call program. Escort on Call is essentially a retainer account that provides remote open access to a TMA senior consultant. Simply open up an Escort on Call account, and you've instantly added a wealth of experience and capability to your existing bench without expanding payroll, administrating complicated contracts, or taking elevated risk on larger commitments. We'll get you the answers you want, guide you through it, show you how it's done, implement any data mining tasks you may wish to delegate, and then remain on call until the next time you need us. And meanwhile, when we're not actively working, you're not paying a dime. So a link to the Escort on Call description page will be among the resources included in the follow-up email. On behalf of myself, Scott, and Keith, thank you again for attending Predictive Analytics Failure to Launch. Have a very pleasant afternoon and evening, and this brings the webinar broadcast to a close.